Aside from pushing people to eat bugs and insects as a viable alternative source of protein, well, there's actually a second simultaneous push to get people to eat lab-grown meat. The thinking goes that since the world is ending due to climate change, and since, of course, the agricultural sector contributes to climate change, we can do away with farms and ranches, and we can replace that meat with cultivated meat grown in a laboratory. And unbeknownst to most people, cultivated meat has already gotten the stamp of approval from the US government. That's because late last year, the USDA gave the green light to two different companies. Quote, Upside Foods and Good Meat, two companies that make what they call cultivated chicken, said they have gotten approval from the US Department of Agriculture to start producing their cell-based proteins. Cultivated or lab-grown meat is grown in a giant vat, much like what you'd find at a beer brewery. This move follows a series of previous approvals which have paved the way for sales of cultivated meat in the US. Last week, Good Meat and Upside said they had received approval for labels for its product made from the USDA. In March, Good Meat said it had received a so-called no questions letter from the Food and Drug Administration. That letter states that the administration is satisfied that the product is safe to sell in the United States. The FDA issued a similar letter to Upside Foods in November. And so as you can see, the USDA as well as the FDA, which are the two agencies overseeing this industry, they have already given their stamp of approval for lab-grown chicken to be sold nationally, which, just as an aside, is something that not even Europe has done. Normally on these types of things, Europe is 1, 2, or sometimes even 5 years ahead of the US. But in the case of synthetic meat, the EU has not given any lab-grown meats the green light. And it actually doesn't even look like it's on the horizon, because doing so in the context of Europe would require a full review by the European Food Safety Authority. And that full review can take upwards of 2 years to actually finish. And as of right now, there does not seem to be any proposals on the table that were sent to that commission to get the ball rolling. Although, while we're on the topic of Europe in general, I will mention that on the flip side, you do have individual European nations banning synthetic meat. For instance, in November of last year, basically at the tail end of last year, Italy became the first EU country to ban the sale or the import of cultivated meat. You also have about a dozen other European countries looking to follow suit. Regardless, though, circling back here to the States, after the USDA made their decision, America became the third country in the world to allow for the sale of synthetic meat, right behind Singapore as well as Israel. However, since the US is essentially an amalgamation of 50 different states, what you're starting to see is individual states pushing back. And along that line, just 5 days ago, Florida enacted a new piece of legislation which bans and even criminalizes the manufacture and sale of lab-grown meat within the border of their states. While signing the bill into law, here's what Governor Ron DeSantis said about it. Quote, Florida is fighting back against the global elite's plan to force the world to eat meat grown in a petri dish or bugs to achieve their authoritarian goals. We will save our beef. There was also a press release made public that cited the bill as being essentially pushback against the World Economic Forum's goal of forcing the world to eat lab-grown meat as well as insects in general. Likewise, you had the Florida Commissioner of Agriculture come out in support of this new law as well, saying the following, quote, Florida is taking a tremendous step in the right direction by signing first-in-the-nation legislation banning lab-grown meat. We must protect our incredible farmers and the integrity of American agriculture. Lab-grown meat is a disgraceful attempt to undermine our proud traditions and prosperity and is in direct opposition to authentic agriculture. Now, just like with any issue, there are two sides to this story. And over on NBC News, they actually hosted a segment on this new Florida law wherein you had on one side Mr. Tom Rasmussen, who is a high-level executive over at Good Meat, which is that cultivated meat company, and on the other hand, you had Mr. Dean Black, who is both a member of the Florida State Legislature as well as a cattle rancher himself. Basically, these two men in that program represented both sides of this particular debate. And so, on his part, here's what Representative Dean Black said when he was asked about why banning fake meat in the state of Florida was a good idea.
There are certain micronutrients that exist in real meat that we know are important to human nutrition. And although the FDA has said that this type of product is safe, that doesn't mean it's healthy. And in Florida, we don't want our citizens used as guinea pigs. We think research and development is fine, but we think a lot of that needs to be done before we say this is going to replace an integral part of the human diet.
Tom,
Look, communist China and communist countries have a history of collectivizing agriculture and food production, and they use that to control their populations. And for this to make sense, it will have to be concentrated in large factories. And look, we are in a very tense geopolitical time with China, North Korea, Iran. And if you concentrate your protein production in a few major factories, you're a few missile strikes from an instant famine. Right now, in our agricultural production system, our protein production is dispersed all across the country. It's impossible to take it all out.
On the flip side, however, you had the executive at the fake meat company lay out his arguments centered around leaving the choice up to the free market and for individuals to make themselves. Take a listen.
so we have the ability to grow meat much more efficiently than the conventional way. And that's going to be really important. I mean, the protein requirements of the planet are going to double between now and 2050. So adding another tool to be able to sustainably make protein is going to be really important. It's not going to replace conventional meat. We're not advocating for that. Certainly that's not being expected from the Florida legislature. But consumers should decide. They should be able to go to a grocery store and determine what type of safe and approved meat they want.
Now, aside from Florida, you currently have several other states in the nation in various stages of passing similar laws banning artificial meat. For instance, just 2 weeks ago, over in Alabama, the state legislature, both the House and the Senate, approved a bill that likewise banned meat from cultured animal cells from being sold in the state. That bill is called SB 23, and it makes it a Class C felony to manufacture, sell, or to distribute food products that are produced from cultured animal cells. It's now sitting on the desk of Governor Kay Ivey awaiting her signature. Likewise, over in Arizona, you have state lawmakers considering 2 new bills there, which would also stop the sale of lab-grown meat. The first piece of legislation is House Bill 2121, which will prohibit anyone in Arizona from offering to sell or to produce a cell-cultured animal product for human consumption. That bill has already passed the House, and it's currently in committee in the state Senate. Then the second piece of legislation is House Bill 2244, and it's also passed by the state House, and it's currently also sitting in the Senate awaiting to be heard. All right, just to pause here for a super quick moment, I'd like to introduce the sponsor of today's episode, Patriot Mobile, who for the past 10 years now has been America's only Christian conservative wireless provider. And when I say only, they really are the only one. They've also been great supporters of the show, which is why partnering with them was pretty much a no-brainer. Now, Patriot Mobile, they offer dependable nationwide coverage, giving you the ability to access all 3 of the major networks. This means that you and your family, you can get the same coverage that you're accustomed to, just without funding companies that hate your values. When you switch to Patriot Mobile, you're essentially voting with your dollars, and you're sending the message that you support free speech, you support religious freedom, you support the sanctity of life, you support the Second Amendment, as well as our veterans and first responders. And best of all, their customer service team is based 100% here in the U.S., keeping the jobs here in America, but also making the switch super easy. You can keep your number, you can keep your phone, or if you need to, you can upgrade your phone if you so want. Just give them a call, and their team will help you find the best plan and the best options for whatever you and your family need. Just head on over to patriotmobile.com/Roman, or just call 972-PATRIOT. And if you use promo code ROMAN, ROMAN, you get free activation. So consider making the switch today. It's again patriotmobile.com/Roman, or just call 972-PATRIOT. This bill will make it illegal to intentionally misrepresent a product not derived from either livestock or poultry as being actual meat. The bill, as I mentioned, is currently in the committee in the state Senate. Furthermore, besides these states, you also have the states of Missouri, Alabama, Arkansas, Kentucky, Maine, Mississippi, Montana, North Dakota, Oklahoma, South Carolina, South Dakota, Wyoming, Kansas, Louisiana, Georgia, as well as Texas, all having passed state-level legislation which forces companies to have a special product label when selling cultivated meat, meaning that in all these different states, you cannot just label meat if it's synthetic meat. You have to very obviously write that it is cultured meat. And so that's pretty much the state of the industry right now in America. The USDA and the FDA have given the green light for synthetic meat to be sold throughout the whole country, while at the same time you're having state-level legislatures passing bills to either ban the sale of this meat or to force the packaging of it to make a specific distinction between cultured meat and regular meat. If you'd like to go deeper into the subject matter, I'll throw my reference notes. You'll be able to find them down in the description box below this video if you want to dive a little bit deeper into this subject matter. Otherwise, until next time, I'm your host, Roman from the Epoch Times. Stay informed. Most importantly, stay free.